Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna 145BT backpack blower. Customer complaint is that it just doesn't run right, it's low on power, can't get the job done. So anytime I hear someone say their backpack blower is low on power, I'm always thinking that it's starving for fuel. This could be a dirty fuel filter, and in a lot of cases that's all the problem is. Could be a hole in the fuel line, could be a restriction in the carburetor, could be a stiff metering diaphragm. We're going to look at all those things. So first I want to look into the fuel tank. The fuel smelled good. The filter is a little dirty. I would, just by glancing at it, I would guess that it's not the reason this thing isn't running right. Although it is pretty dark. I want to pressure test the fuel line. I can't though because I dropped the line in the tank and it's too short to recover. But we'll be able to access that once we have the carburetor off of here. But you know, with any of these repairs, if that cylinder's scored, well, then we're going to have to make a phone call, aren't we? So I'm going to take a look inside and just make sure what we're seeing is clean and shiny with no scoring in the cylinder. And this spark plug hole is just big enough for me to get the camera in there, or the light in there, and take a look at what's going on. Now I should mention that there's other possible reasons than the ones I've listed why this could be low on power. It could be, you know, a plugged spark arrestor screen. Could be a scored cylinder. Could be a restriction or interference with the fan of the blower. Dirty air filter. There's a lot of other reasons. I just listed off the most common ones. So we have a stubborn air filter cover here, but we'll get her off of there. Now take a look at the way this is assembled. Right away I noticed that someone's been in here messing around. Which, I mean, he may have been in there cleaning the air filter, but he didn't put it back together right. So there's a big foam block, which is pretty ugly by the way. But this metal plate is supposed to go in first and keep that foam block from getting sucked into the carburetor. And it looks like a little bit of foam may have been pulled. You know, the throttle acts normal yet. There's nothing jamming it up. But just be mindful of the order that this goes back together. So there's two big screws holding that air filter base and the carburetor in place. You're going to see that someone assembled this using Loctite. And is giving me grief. So the screw head itself is, it's a Phillips style head, but one of the slots is wider so that you can use a slotted screwdriver on it. So that Phillips head on the power tool was just skipping. The screwdriver that I grabbed was a JIS screwdriver, and that was skipping. So I'm using a flat blade screwdriver here. And I probably didn't grab a big enough sized one. So I'm going to grab another one. There's the big one. And eventually it'll come off of here. Eventually. Still not loose. This is the kind of stuff that's really frustrating when you're doing these repairs. Something that should have taken 4 seconds takes 5 minutes. And you can see that there was red Loctite on there. And there's the screw head. That didn't damage it too bad. So now that we got those two screws out, we can move forward here. Yeah, that other one had red Loctite on it too. I don't know. why it backed out so much easier. Here's our gasket. It really looks terrible initially, but when I take a closer look at it, you know, there's nothing wrong with it really. I'm going to reuse that gasket. We have a plastic insulation block or a carburetor adapter or whatever you want to call it between the carburetor and the cylinder. And when I get to this point in a repair, I usually check the screws on there, especially if someone's complaining on low power, you know. If that's loose, it could be running lean. But they were tight, so we're good there. Now we can pop the grommet out of the top of the fuel tank and access our fuel line. We can pressure test the line and the carburetor now. And you see that I pump it up to 10 pounds. And it held. The video kind of jumped there, but it held 10 pounds of pressure. Now at this point, if the line felt at all old or spongy or hard or any of that stuff, I would replace it. But that fuel line felt pretty good. So I just popped the filter on it. And the way I'm doing this is a little wonky, to be honest with you. I don't know why I didn't just pull this fuel line off right away. And I know a lot of people are screaming at the computer, why didn't you just replace the line? So I'm using my new handy dandy custom ground fuel line removal tool. Alright. There's our carburetor. And in the interest of time, you know, I don't have to pull that throttle cable off the carburetor. In this case, you know, it would mean getting a wrench and loosening the nut and unhooking the cable and spinning the whole thing off of there. Another couple of minutes. This guy, he was kind of barking about costs before we even got involved in the repair. So I'm trying to do this as quickly and efficiently as possible. He doesn't get a new fuel line because this one feels good and he don't want to spend any money. So we remove the 4 screws on the carburetor to open it up. And we see the micro screen in here. It looks pretty good. Let's take a look at the fuel pump and the metering diaphragm. There's the metering diaphragm. And there's the fuel pump. So the pump may be showing signs of age. The metering diaphragm is, it might work yet, but it doesn't work really good. But here I'm just trying to blow some schmutz through. If you looked really close, you could see that some of that carb cleaner was coming through the opening, through the venturi of the carburetor. Because we were blowing it through. Let me just hold the throttle open while I do this. There we go. And if I squirt the carb cleaner in here, you should be able to see a stream of it coming out the end of that white tube. I don't know if you actually caught that on video, but that's what I was looking for when I was doing it. If that was restricted, that would cause a lack of power on the top end, because this is a fixed jet style carburetor. And there won't be any carburetor adjustments that can be made. So a closer look at this metering diaphragm. Yeah, it's stiff. That needs to be replaced. It shouldn't hold a memory like that when you move it. So we're going to put a kit in it. Just the soft parts. First thing, yeah, I don't know. I show these carb refreshes in most of my videos. The key to this one is there's so many different gaskets. You got to make sure you grab the right one. So there I am laying out the gasket that came with it and matching it up to the gasket in the kit. Sometimes there's one that looks really close, but it's off by just one little hole. So then we also have to have, so we got the pump on there. We got to have the paper gasket now. There we go. Now we can just set that on top. I don't know what I'm looking at here. I guess just a sanity check, make sure I got it in right order. So on the metering diaphragm side, this can be a little deceiving because the metering diaphragm itself kind of looks like it should be the shape of that gasket. And it's so thin that sometimes you can't tell that it's really not the same shape. If you look at it, it's definitely, when it's off of the gasket, it looks different, right? So you just got to take a close look at how the first one was put together so you get the holes all lined up when you put the new one together. And if you're not dealing with a customer on a budget, now would be a good time to replace that primer bulb as well. This one doesn't feel like it needs to be replaced, so we're going to leave it. And again, you'll notice that I did this whole refresh with that throttle cable still attached. I don't know what he's thinking about now. Well, maybe this fuel line, which this one have to be replaced. It was barely hanging on there, and you could tell by the color of it that it had seen some age. The answer to the question is, which fuel line is better, the yellow plastic stuff or the black rubber stuff? In this case, it would seem that the black fuel hose held up better. And we didn't see any evidence in that micro screen of any black hose deterioration going on. There's no particles from the inside of the hose that found its way to the carburetor, which I guess also helps justify not replacing it. Which is probably not the best practice, but again, it's another couple bucks I can save the guy. And here's another spot where we're going to save a couple bucks and reuse this gasket. It's probably, I'm just off the top of my head, probably a $3 to $6 gasket. But it looked like it was in pretty decent shape. So we are getting the screws that had Loctite on them to pass through the air filter base, through the carburetor, and then we'll screw that whole mess up to the insulation block. There we go, we kind of got it lined up. So the screws go in pretty decent. I don't know why that one came out so darn hard. But we'll crank them down here with the flat tip screwdriver, and then we're gonna see if this thing's gonna start and run decent at full throttle. And if it does, then that's all I'm gonna have for you on the Husqvarna 145BT blower that didn't run so good and wanted to be fixed on a budget. Thanks for watching. Later.